Power Lunch, brought to you by Altec. Leading technologies, touching lives.
Welcome back to Power Lunch. There's talk of booze ads being banned. What effect could this have on the economy? Earlier on CNBC Africa, we spoke to Sipho Motsepe, co-owner of Kenna Media, and also Rob Jeffery, senior economist at Econometrix. Here's that conversation.
When we investigated, we did a world survey of the literature.
Right.
And we found that to be contradictory and some of it conflicting. There were reports in favor, saying there was a positive, and others saying that there was no relationship. In South Africa, we looked very closely at the numbers, but in particularly we focused on alcohol advertising, the expenditure versus the alcohol consumption per capita.
Right.
And in that, there is no relationship, and in fact, from a statistical point of view, the indications are that there's no relationship. One can conclude from that that in practice what is going to happen is there will be little effect on alcohol consumption, and more particularly on alcohol abuse, which is a very small percentage of the consuming public. Now,
the other thing you found out, of course, is that there will be a cost to banning alcohol advertising.
Absolutely. There would be loss of revenue in the advertising industry approaching 4 billion, and of that, there's a 7.4 billion drop in the overall GDP. So it affects jobs in the advertising industry, it affects jobs in the supply industries associated with it, but more particularly, it actually causes a loss just going through the numbers. In the media industry alone, we're talking of 1.4 billion potential drop in advertising revenue. Now that translates for SABC something like 540 million, DST 440 million, I think ETV 300 million, and then radio and other areas about 100 million.
Right.
Now these are very significant numbers.
So I'm obviously conflicted because we're a TV station here, and of course advertising to come onto the channel. So I'm going to try and take away what's of interest to me and try and talk as dispassionately as we can about this. Sipho, that's why you are here. You're a media owner. What's your fear if this were implemented?
If the ban was implemented, most agencies are linked to production houses, they're linked to printing houses, they're linked to TV channels like yours, radio stations, and the supply chain of the ad spend by the liquor companies ends up at the end of the day affecting companies that do the printing for the billboards, companies that do the recordings for the ads on radio stations, production houses, agencies that hire actors for the ads, and most importantly, the TV channel that we just mentioned, your SABCs and your ETVs and so on, use this revenue to invest in content.
The counter argument I've heard is that where this has been done before, and the ban of tobacco has been used as an example, the money has gone elsewhere. There have been other avenues that have been found where that money has ended up, and it's been spent in any case. So the suggestion is that that will just change the flow of where the money will go rather than actually cut jobs.
This won't be the case with alcohol, because at the time when they banned the tobacco advertising, that was when the cell phone companies got into the game, and they were advertising a lot more than the cigarette companies. So that the withdrawal of the tobacco ad spend was replaced by the cell phone companies who advertise a lot more aggressively than the tobacco companies. But the point I also want to make with cigarettes, because people always make the comparison, there's a fundamental difference between alcohol advertising and tobacco advertising. You cannot smoke responsibly. So one cigarette is bad for you. But you can drink responsibly. And that is a fact that we as an industry want to put across, to say, let us advertise, and in our advertising, keep on reminding the public that you can drink responsibly.
If you overdo it, you will be in trouble.
Yeah, but we did not put up a fight with the tobacco advertising because the then health minister, Dr. Nkosazana Zuma, had a very persuasive argument that I don't see how you guys are going to advertise responsible smoking because one cigarette is just bad. But in this case, a glass of wine won't harm anyone.
Yeah. Rob, let me come to you because the other side of the argument has also been the cost of alcohol abuse. One figure that I've seen bandied about is 37 billion rand. I don't know if that's an accurate figure. If you look at it on the surface, it does appear like the cost of 7 billion rand out of GDP versus the cost of 37 billion rand of what it costs to help reduce alcohol abuse. It does seem net that's better to ban than not to ban.
Well, correct. The figure is reasonably accurate that you have given. But the question that must be asked is what impact will such a ban have on the industry and alcohol abuse? And one's just got to say that according to the statistics and the research we've done, there will be really very little impact on alcohol consumption and alcohol abuse. I think one must also bear in mind that in South Africa, roughly 26% of all alcohol consumption is sold through or bought through unlicensed premises. It's also unbranded goods. Now, what one happens when one has prohibition and bans, people tend to move towards that particular area.
Black market industry
and
works out.
That area will grow. So we see a growth potentially in the unlicensed premises, and the impact, because it is largely thought that alcohol abuse comes primarily from that particular market sector. It could actually lead to an increase in alcohol abuse.
That's the other side I wanted to explore as well. The fact that if you do ban it, someone is going to profit. Who's going to profit from this?
Well, that's a good question, and I think one question is to say what are the advantages and disadvantages of such a ban? And quite frankly,
what did you find?
Well, our take is that there's very little or very few advantages, but the potential downturn and disadvantages are much more substantial.
And the healthier population, Dr. Aaron Motsoledu would argue. Final thoughts, Sebo?
I think I want to answer the question about who's going to profit if we ban alcohol advertising. Now, if they ban alcohol advertising, the only people who are going to profit, funny enough, are the alcohol companies themselves, because their entire expenditure will then be turned into profit, and then they won't have to defend their market share against new entrants. So the very same people that government is trying to punish are the ones who stand to benefit the most. So it's a very complicated environment. So I'd like to appeal to government not to proceed with this, because South Africa will lose.
Don't do it. South Africa will lose. You want the final word?
Well, in practice, what will happen, and I agree with Sepa, that there will be a reduction in competition. The larger establishment companies will continue to prosper with very little effect on alcohol abuse, which, after all, is the objective of the ban.
Interesting chat, actually. If you go back to the 1970s, 1980s, cigarette advertising was all over Formula One, for example. There was a six-wheeled car called the JPS Special, and now that's gone. So alcohol has to follow. There's a great debate in the UK going on about football teams, Premiership football having alcohol sponsors. It's got to go, and it will go. And we've got to go now as well, because that's it for Power Lunch today. If you're in West Africa, you have your own Power Lunch. And if you're in Sub-Saharan Africa, it's time for Fin Week Money Matters. Have a great weekend. I'll see you on Monday.
Power Lunch, brought to you by Altec. Leading technologies, touching lives.
Markets, markets, and more markets. And how to make money from markets. That's what you want, and that's what Squawk with me, Bruce Whitfield, will give you. Join me and my guests every Thursday as we sum up, debate, and thrash out the week's most interesting and important markets and